Baby found a German shepherd, crying for help in a shallow pit. What happened next? Left everyone in tears. What happened next will shock you beyond belief. Before we start, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. The story you're about to listen will change how you see the bond between humans and animals forever. The afternoon sun hung low over the quiet roadside park, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement where 5-year-old Zane played with his bright red toy car. His father Omar sat on a weathered bench nearby, scrolling through his phone while keeping one eye on his son. The park was nearly empty, just the way Omar preferred it these days. After losing his wife Sarah 2 years ago, he found peace in the quiet moments with Zane, away from the pitying looks and endless questions from well-meaning neighbors. Zane pushed his car along the ground, making soft engine noises with his lips. The little boy had his mother's curious eyes and his father's stubborn streak, a combination that often led to unexpected adventures. Today would be no different. The toy car rolled too fast down a small slope and disappeared behind a construction fence that blocked off part of the park. Zane scrambled after it, his small hands gripping the chain link as he peered through the gaps. "Papa, my car!" he called out, pointing toward the shallow utility pit where his toy had landed. Omar looked up from his phone, sighing. "Zane, stay away from there. It's not safe." But as Omar approached the fence, a sound made both father and son freeze. A thin, desperate whine echoed from the pit, not the mechanical sound of a broken toy, but something alive and in pain. "Papa," Zane whispered, his small hand tugging at Omar's sleeve. "Someone's calling me." Omar's protective instincts kicked in. "Zane, step back. We don't know what's down there." The whining grew louder, more urgent. It was a sound that cut straight through Omar's caution and grabbed at something deeper. The same instinct that had made him rush to help strangers on the street. The same impulse that had drawn Sarah to rescue every stray cat in their neighborhood. Against his better judgment, Omar found himself pushing aside a loose section of the fence. The pit was about 6 feet deep, lined with concrete and partially filled with muddy water from recent rains. And there, pressed against the far wall, was a sight that made Omar's breath catch. A German shepherd stared up at them, her dark eyes filled with a pain that seemed to go beyond physical hurt. Her golden brown coat was matted with mud and what looked like dried blood. She tried to bark when she saw them, but only a broken, rasping sound came out. "Oh my God," Omar breathed. Zane dropped to his knees at the edge of the pit, his small face pressed against the fence. "Papa, she's hurt. We have to help her." The dog, Omar could see now that it was female, looked directly at Zane. Something passed between them in that moment, something Omar couldn't quite understand, but felt in his chest like a tight fist loosening. "Easy, girl," Omar called down softly. "We're here. We're going to help you." The dog's tail moved slightly, not quite a wag, but a tremor of hope. She tried to stand, but her legs shook and she slumped back against the concrete wall. That's when Omar noticed the collar around her neck. Not a normal pet collar, but something thick and rubber, with what looked like metal contacts pressing into her fur. "Papa, look!" Zane pointed to the slope of the pit. Loose dirt and small rocks had begun to slide down toward the trapped animal. The recent rains had made the ground unstable, and their presence at the edge was making it worse. The dog's eyes widened as debris scattered around her. She pressed herself tighter against the wall, but there was nowhere to go. The slope was crumbling faster now, threatening to bury her under a pile of mud and stone. "Stay right there, girl!" Omar shouted, his mind racing. "Zane, run to the car and get the emergency blanket from the trunk, the blue bag behind the spare tire." Zane sprinted away without question, his small legs moving faster than Omar had ever seen them. The boy had inherited his mother's quick thinking in emergencies. Omar looked around frantically for anything that might help. A construction site meant tools, ropes, ladders, but everything was locked away behind the main fence. All he had were his bare hands and a determination that surprised him with its intensity. "I'm coming down to you," he called to the dog, testing the stability of the pit's edge with his foot. The dog whimpered and tried to move toward his voice, but another small avalanche of dirt made her retreat. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, the breathing of an animal that had been hurt badly and recently. Zane returned with the blanket, his cheeks flushed from running. "Papa, I found this too." He held up a length of rope that had been coiled with their emergency supplies. Perfect. Omar tied one end of the rope to the fence post and tested its strength. I'm going down. You stay up here and talk to her, okay? Keep her calm. What should I say? Whatever feels right. Just let her know she's not alone. Omar lowered himself into the pit, the rope burning against his palms. The smell hit him immediately. Not just mud and stagnant water, but something else. Fear, pain. The unmistakable scent of an animal that had been hurt by humans. The dog watched his approach with wary eyes. Up close, Omar could see the full extent of her condition. The rubber collar was too tight, pressing into infected wounds on her neck. Her ribs showed through her matted coat, and there were marks on her legs that looked disturbingly like burns. Easy, beautiful, Omar whispered, crouching low and extending his hand, palm up. I'm not going to hurt you. Above them, Zane's voice drifted down. It's okay, doggy. My papa helps everyone. He helped Mrs. Nora when her car broke down. He helped the man at the grocery store when he fell. He's good at fixing things. The dog's ears twitched at Zane's voice. Something in the innocence of the child's words seemed to reach her in a way that Omar's adult reassurances couldn't. That's right, Omar said softly. Zane's telling the truth. We're going to get you out of here. He spread the emergency blanket on the ground and slowly, carefully, began to work it underneath the dog. She was heavier than he'd expected, not fat, but solid muscle despite her malnourished state. A working dog, bred for strength and endurance. As he lifted her, she made a sound that was part whimper, part sigh. Her head fell against his shoulder, and for a moment, Omar felt the full weight of her trust. It had been a long time since anyone, human or animal, had depended on him completely. I've got you, he whispered into her muddy fur. You're safe now? Getting out of the pit with the dog was harder than getting down had been. Omar had to wrap the blanket around her like a sling and use the rope to haul them both up, while Zane pulled from above with all his 5-year-old strength. When they finally reached solid ground, all three of them were breathing hard. The dog lay on the blanket, looking up at them with eyes that held a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. But when Omar tried to help her stand, she collapsed immediately. Papa, she can't walk, Zayan observed with the blunt honesty of childhood. Omar was examining her legs when the dog did something unexpected. She lifted her head, nose pointed toward a nearby storm drain, and let out a sound unlike any she'd made before. Not a bark or a whine, but something almost like crying. What is it, girl? Omar followed her gaze to the metal grate covering the storm drain. What's down there? The dog struggled to her feet, took 2 shaky steps toward the drain, and collapsed again. But her message was clear. Something in that drain was important to her. Zayn was already on his knees by the grate, peering through the metal slats. Papa, his voice was barely a whisper. I think I hear something. Omar knelt beside his son and listened. At first, there was nothing but the distant sound of traffic and wind through the trees. Then, faint but unmistakable, came a sound that made his heart skip. Tiny, desperate peeps. Not birds, too regular, too urgent. The sound of very young animals in distress. Puppies, Omar breathed. The dog on the blanket lifted her head and looked directly at him, as if to say, Now you understand. Omar's hands shook as he tried to lift the heavy metal grate. It was stuck, held down by rust and years of debris. The peeping sounds grew fainter, as if the animals inside were losing strength. Zane, call doctor. Layla, her number's in my phone. Under vet emergency. Tell her we have a mother dog and what sounds like puppies trapped in a storm drain. Tell her we need help now. As Zane fumbled with the phone, Omar threw his full weight against the grate. It groaned but held. The peeping from below was getting weaker. Doctor, Layla says to keep the mother calm and not to flood the drain with water, Zane relayed, his voice tight with concentration. She's coming with tools, but she says we need to try to keep the air warm down there if we can. Omar looked around desperately. The late afternoon air was cooling, and if those puppies were as young as they sounded, hypothermia could kill them in minutes. The car heater, he said suddenly. Zane, start the car and turn the heat up full blast. I'm going to try to get this grate off. With strength born of desperation, Omar pried at the edges of the metal cover. His fingers bled where the rusty metal cut into them, but he kept working. Behind him, the mother dog watched with eyes that held an almost human understanding of urgency. The grate finally gave way with a shriek of protesting metal. Omar peered into the darkness below and saw them. 4 tiny shapes huddled in a shallow puddle at the bottom of the drain. 3 were moving weakly. 1 lay completely still. "Zane, bring the hairdryer from the emergency kit," Omar called out. "Set it to cool air. We need to warm the space without overheating them." As Zane ran to get the hairdryer, Omar lowered himself into the drain. The space was cramped and filled with the smell of stagnant water, but he managed to reach the puppies. They were so small they fit in his cupped hands, their eyes still closed, their fur barely covering pink skin. 3 of them squirmed weakly when he touched them, but the 4th, a little male with markings just like his mother, was cold and motionless. Omar's throat tightened as he lifted the tiny body. He had seen death too many times in the past 2 years, felt the weight of loss in ways that still woke him up at night. He couldn't bear for Zane to experience that kind of pain, not over this innocent creature they'd tried so hard to save. But as he cradled the puppy against his chest, climbing back out of the drain, he heard Zane's voice calling out instructions from Dr. Layla. "Papa, she says if the puppy isn't breathing, you can try chest compressions, tiny ones, with just your finger. And she says sometimes they just need a little breath." Omar looked at his son, then at the mother dog, then at the still form in his hands. The other 3 puppies were wrapped in his jacket, making weak but steady sounds. This little one deserved the same chance. Following Dr. Layla's instructions that Zane relayed over the phone, Omar placed the puppy on the blanket and began gentle chest compressions with his index finger. The tiny body was so fragile he was afraid of breaking ribs, but Dr. Layla had said to be firm. "Now breathe into his nose," Zane said, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "Just a tiny puff, like you're blowing out a birthday candle." Omar sealed his lips over the puppy's tiny muzzle and gave the gentlest breath he could manage. The little chest rose slightly, then fell. He tried again, alternating with chest compressions, while the mother dog watched with an intensity that made his hands steadier. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the puppy shuddered. A tiny squeak escaped his mouth, then another, stronger one. His little legs began to move, and suddenly he was crying with the same vigor as his siblings. Omar sagged back on his heels, overwhelmed by relief. Zane threw his arms around his father's neck, both of them crying openly now. Even the mother dog seemed to relax, her breathing becoming deeper and more regular. "We did it, Papa," Zane whispered. "We saved them all." But their celebration was interrupted when Omar noticed something that made his stomach drop. While he'd been focused on the puppies, he'd gotten a closer look at the mother dog's collar. What he'd thought were just metal contacts were actually electrodes. And on the back of the collar, partially hidden by matted fur, was a shaved patch of skin with numbers burned into it like a brand. This wasn't just a lost pet. This was something much darker. As if sensing his discovery, the dog's ears suddenly pricked forward, her body going rigid with alertness. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of a car engine, getting closer. The dog's lips pulled back in a silent snarl, not at Omar and Zane, but at whatever was approaching. Omar's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know you have our property. We'll be in touch about pickup arrangements. Don't make this difficult." The mother dog's eyes met Omar's, and in them he saw not just intelligence, but a desperate plea. Whatever she was running from, whoever had hurt her and stolen her babies, they were coming. And Omar realized that saving her from the pit had been just the beginning. Dr. Layla arrived within 20 minutes, her small veterinary van screeching to a halt beside Omar's car. She was a woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and hands that moved with the confidence of someone who had saved countless lives. She took one look at the scene, Omar holding 4 tiny puppies, Zane sitting protectively beside the mother dog, and the ominous text message still glowing on Omar's phone screen, and immediately understood they were dealing with more than just a rescue. "How long have the puppies been separated from their mother?" she asked, pulling on latex gloves as she knelt beside them. "We found them maybe an hour ago," Omar replied, carefully transferring the puppies to a warming box Dr. Layla had brought. This little one wasn't breathing at first. Dr. Layla examined each puppy with gentle efficiency, checking their temperature, listening to their tiny, heartbeats, and making notes on a clipboard. They're dehydrated and underweight, but alive. That's what matters right now. She looked up at the mother dog, who had been watching the examination with anxious eyes. What's her condition? She can't walk properly, and there's this collar. Omar gestured toward the rubber device around the dog's neck. Dr. Layla's expression darkened as she examined the collar more closely. Her fingers traced the electrode contacts, and when she saw the burned numbers on the dog's neck, her jaw tightened with anger. "This is a shock collar," she said quietly, her voice carefully controlled so Zane wouldn't pick up on her fury. "But not the kind used for training pets. This is industrial grade, designed for other purposes." She produced a specialized tool from her bag and carefully cut through the collar's thick rubber. As it fell away, the dog's relief was immediate and visible. She lifted her head higher, took a deeper breath, and for the first time since they'd found her, attempted to wag her tail. "There, beautiful doctor," Layla murmured, gently cleaning the wounds where the electrodes had pressed into the dog's skin. "That's never going back on you." As she worked, she explained to Omar in low tones what she was seeing. "These burns are recent, maybe 2 or 3 days old. The scarring on her legs suggests this has been going on for weeks, possibly months. And these numbers..." She photographed the brand with her phone. "I've seen this before in cases involving illegal fighting rings." Omar felt sick. The idea that someone had systematically tortured this gentle creature, who had trusted them enough to let them rescue her babies, made him want to find whoever was responsible and make them pay. "What do we do?" he asked. "First, we get her and the puppies somewhere safe. My clinic has a secure room where we keep animals in protective custody. Then we call the authorities." Dr. Layla's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with a frown. "That's strange. I just got a text from someone claiming to be your business partner, asking about pickup times for a German Shepherd." Omar showed her the message he'd received. "They know we have her." Dr. Layla's expression grew grim. "Then we need to move fast. Help me get her into the van." Loading the mother dog required careful maneuvering. She was willing to trust Dr. Layla, perhaps sensing the woman's expertise with animals, but she refused to let the puppies out of her sight. They ended up arranging the warming box so she could see and smell her babies during the short drive to the clinic. Zane rode in the back with the dogs, his small hand resting gently on the mother's head. "What should we call her, Papa?" he asked as they pulled out of the park. Omar thought for a moment. The dog had shown such courage, such determination to protect her babies, despite everything she'd suffered. "How about Luna? Like the moon, she guides us through the darkness." The dog's ears perked up at the name, and she looked directly at Zane as if she approved. Dr. Layla's clinic was a modest building on the outskirts of town, but it was equipped with everything they needed. The secure room she'd mentioned was actually a comfortable space with soft bedding, gentle lighting, and soundproofed walls to help traumatized animals feel safe. As they settled Luna and her puppies, Dr. Layla's assistant Jake arrived to help with the medical examination. He was a young man with a gentle manner who had worked with rescue animals before. "I need to scan her for a microchip," Dr. Layla explained to Omar. "If she's registered, we might be able to trace her original owner." The scanner beeped as it passed over Luna's shoulder, but the readout was garbled, letters and numbers that didn't form any recognizable pattern. "That's been tampered with," Jake observed, looking at the display. "Someone scrambled the chip data deliberately." Dr. Layla's phone rang, and when she answered, her face went pale. She spoke in hushed tones for several minutes before hanging up. "That was Officer Hassan from the police department," she said. "He's had reports about a dog fighting operation in the area. They've been trying to infiltrate it for months, but the people running it are careful, very careful." "You think Luna escaped from them?" Omar asked. "I think Luna was being used as breeding stock," Dr. Layla replied grimly. "Those burns on her legs, the malnutrition, the shock collar, it all fits the pattern. They keep the mother dogs weak and compliant, then sell the puppies for fighting or use them as bait animals." Zane, who had been quietly listening, looked up with confused eyes. "What's a bait animal?" Omar exchanged a look with Dr. Layla, neither wanting to explain that concept to a 5-year-old. "It's just something bad people do to animals," Omar said carefully. "But Luna is safe now. We won't let anyone hurt her again." As if she understood, Luna lifted her head and looked at Omar with those intelligent brown eyes. Then she did something that made everyone in the room catch their breath. She got up, walked slowly but steadily to where Zane was sitting and laid her head in his lap. "Papa," Zane whispered, his small hands gently stroking Luna's ears. "She's not scared anymore." But their moment of peace was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up outside the clinic. Dr. Layla went to the window and peered through the blinds. "Black sedan," she reported. "Two men inside. They're just sitting there." Luna's entire body tensed. Her ears flattened against her head, and a low growl rumbled in her chest. The first aggressive sound she'd made since they rescued her. Omar's phone buzzed with another text. "We know where you are. The dogs belong to us. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Call Officer Hassan, Doctor," Layla said urgently. "Tell him we need police here now." But as Omar dialed, Jake called out from the front of the clinic, "The car is moving. They're circling the building." Luna struggled to her feet, positioning herself between the door and her puppies. Despite her injuries and exhaustion, every instinct in her body was focused on protecting her babies. "There's something else, Doctor," Layla said as she watched the sedan complete another slow circuit of the building. "Officer Hassan told me they've been tracking vehicles associated with this operation. Black sedans with tinted windows, usually traveling in pairs." "I only see one car," Omar said. "That's what worries me. Where's the second one?" Their answer came in the form of headlights suddenly flooding the back parking area. A second black sedan had positioned itself behind the building, effectively trapping them inside. Omar pulled Zane closer to him, his heart pounding. This was supposed to be a simple rescue. Help an injured animal and her babies. He never imagined it would put his son in danger. Luna seemed to sense the rising tension in the room. She looked at Zane, then at Omar, then at her own puppies. Something passed across her face. A decision being made. She walked to the front window and barked once, sharp and clear. It wasn't the broken sound she'd made in the pit, but the powerful bark of a German shepherd in her prime. A challenge. The response came immediately. Car doors slammed outside, and heavy footsteps approached the clinic's front door. "Dr. Nasir," a voice called from outside, using doctor. Layla's last name. "We know you have our property. Send the dog out and nobody gets hurt." Dr. Layla moved to stand beside Luna at the window. "Those dogs are under veterinary care," she called back. "If you have legal claim to them, you can present your documentation to the police." A harsh laugh came from outside. "Lady, we don't need documentation. We just need our investment back." Luna pressed closer to the window, and Omar could see her muscles coiling as if she was preparing to spring. But she wasn't looking at the front door anymore. Her attention was focused on something else. The back door. Omar heard it then. The soft scraping sound of someone trying to pick the lock. While the man at the front kept them distracted, his partner was trying to break in from behind. "Jake," Dr. Layla whispered urgently. "Call 911. Tell them we have intruders attempting to break into a veterinary clinic." But before Jake could dial, the back door swung open. A tall man in dark clothing stepped into the clinic, holding something in his hand that reflected the fluorescent lights. Luna moved faster than Omar would have thought possible for an injured animal. She launched herself across the room, not attacking, but intercepting, putting herself between the intruder and the puppies. The man raised whatever he was holding, but Luna was already airborne. She hit him squarely in the chest, and both of them went down in a tangle of limbs and growling. "Luna, no!" Zane screamed. The front door exploded inward as the second intruder kicked it open, but instead of another criminal, Officer Hassan burst through, his weapon drawn and his backup right behind him. "Police! Everyone on the ground!" The chaos lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. When it was over, both intruders were on the floor in handcuffs. Luna was back beside her puppies, with only minor scratches, and Zane was crying with relief in Omar's arms. Officer Hassan examined what the backdoor intruder had been carrying. A tranquilizer gun loaded with enough sedative to knock out a large dog. They weren't planning to hurt her, the officer explained to Omar. They wanted her alive and compliant. These puppies are worth a lot of money to the right buyers. As the criminals were led away, one of them shouted back at Dr. Layla, "This isn't over. Mr. Kane doesn't like losing his investments." Officer Hassan's expression darkened at the mention of that name. "Kane," he muttered. "We've been trying to get something on him for years." "Who is he?" Omar asked. "Runs what looks like a legitimate security dog training business on the surface, but we suspect he's involved in much darker activities. Dogfighting, illegal breeding, possibly worse. Officer Hassan looked down at Luna, who was now calmly nursing her puppies as if nothing had happened. If she escaped from Kane's operation, she's the first witness we've had. Dr. Layla looked up from where she was checking Luna's vitals. Officer, these people know where my clinic is. They know who I am, who Omar is. What's to stop them from coming back with more people, or trying something at Omar's house? The officer considered this. We can provide protection, but our resources are limited. The safest thing would be to relocate both the dogs and your family until we can build a case against Kane. Omar's mind raced. Where could they go? His house was out of the question now. His sister lived across town, but if these people were as connected as Officer Hassan suggested, nowhere in the city would be truly safe. I have a cabin about 2 hours north of here, Dr. Layla offered. It's remote, off the main roads. I use it sometimes for animals that need extended recovery time away from the city. Luna looked up from her puppies as if she had understood every word. She walked over to Zane, who was still shaken from the encounter, and gently licked his hand. She wants to stay with us, Zane said, with the simple certainty of childhood. Don't you, Luna? The dog's tail wagged once, a clear answer. Officer Hassan nodded. The cabin sounds like our best option. We'll post patrols along the main roads leading up there, and I'll coordinate with the county sheriff's department for additional support. But understand, this Kane character doesn't give up easily. If he was willing to send people to break into a veterinary clinic, he won't stop just because we arrested 2 of his workers. As they prepared to leave for the cabin, Dr. Layla pulled Omar aside. There's something else you should know, she said quietly. When I examined Luna more thoroughly, I found evidence that she's been used for breeding multiple times. The scarring suggests she's had several litters, all taken from her when they were very young. Omar felt his chest tighten. How many babies has she lost? Impossible to say for certain, but based on what I'm seeing, many. These 4 puppies might be the first ones she's ever been allowed to keep and raise. Looking at Luna, who was tenderly cleaning her babies while Zane sat beside her, reading a picture book aloud, Omar felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about helping an injured animal anymore. This was about justice for all the puppies that had been stolen from her, all the suffering she had endured, all the love she had been denied. We're going to keep her safe, he said, and it sounded less like a promise and more like an oath. All of them. Dr. Layla smiled for the first time since the break-in attempt. I believe you will. As they loaded Luna and the puppies into Dr. Layla's van for the journey to the cabin, Omar couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide potential danger. Every car on the road could be following them. But when he looked at Zane, who had fallen asleep with one hand resting on Luna's head, and at the 4 tiny puppies sleeping peacefully in their warming box, he knew they had made the right choice. Sometimes protecting what matters most requires taking risks. The question that remained was simple but terrifying. Just how far would Kane go to get his property back? Tell us in the comments, what would you do if you found yourself in Omar's situation? Would you risk everything to protect an animal you just met? The cabin Dr. Layla had mentioned turned out to be a cozy wooden structure nestled among tall pine trees, about 3 miles off the main highway down a winding dirt road. It had been her grandmother's retreat, she explained as they unloaded their supplies, a place where injured wildlife could recover away from the stress of human civilization. My grandmother used to say that healing happens best when the soul can breathe freely, Dr. Layla said, carrying the puppy's warming box into the main room. I think Luna will like it here. The German Shepherd had been quiet during the drive, alert but calm, as if she sensed they were moving towards safety rather than away from it. Now, as she explored the cabin's main room with careful steps, her tail began to wag slightly. For the first time since they'd found her, she looked almost relaxed. Omar set up a comfortable area in the living room using blankets Dr. Layla had brought. The puppies were placed in a low-sided box where Luna could easily reach them, and Zane immediately claimed the spot right beside them, determined to be their protector. Can I give them names, Papa? Zayn asked, watching the tiny creatures squirm and make soft peeping sounds. I think Luna should choose their names, Omar replied, but you can help. As evening fell, they settled into an unexpected routine. Dr. Layla prepared a special meal for Luna, high-protein food mixed with supplements to help her regain strength. Omar cooked a simple dinner for the humans, while Zain entertained himself by drawing pictures of dogs and showing them to Luna, who seemed genuinely interested in his artwork. "This one is you," Zain explained, holding up a drawing of a brown and black dog with what looked like a crown. "See? You're the queen dog, and these are your babies." He pointed to 4 small circles he'd drawn around the larger figure. Luna studied the picture seriously, then gently licked Zain's hand. It was becoming clear that she had formed a special bond with the little boy, perhaps seeing in his innocence something she wanted to protect, just as she protected her own babies. As they named the puppies, each one seemed to develop its own personality. The smallest, a female with white markings on her chest, was clearly the most vocal. Dr. Layla suggested calling her Echo because of her tendency to answer every sound with a tiny yip. The largest male, who had been the one they had revived, was surprisingly gentle despite his size, earning the name Gentle. The other female was curious about everything, nosing around the blankets and trying to climb out of the box, so she became Scout. The final male was content to sleep curled against his mother, peaceful and calm. They named him Dream. "Perfect names," Dr. Layla approved. "They suit their personalities." But their peaceful evening was interrupted when Omar's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but something made him answer anyway. "Mr. Omar," a smooth voice said, "my name is Marcus Kane. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Omar's blood ran cold. He gestured for silence and put the phone on speaker so Dr. Layla could hear. "I don't know what you're talking about," Omar replied carefully. Kane chuckled, a sound without warmth. "Please, Mr. Omar, let's not play games. You have a German Shepherd female and 4 puppies. These animals are valuable breeding stock that was stolen from my facility. I'm prepared to compensate you for your rescue efforts if you return them promptly." Luna's ears flattened against her head at the sound of Kane's voice, even through the phone. She moved closer to her puppies, positioning herself between them and the device. "These animals were abandoned and injured," Omar said, finding courage he didn't know he possessed. "They're under veterinary care now." "Abandoned?" Kane's voice hardened. "Mr. Omar, I run a legitimate security dog training business. That female is worth more than your annual salary, and those puppies represent years of careful genetic planning. You're harboring stolen property." Dr. Layla shook her head and pointed to the scarring on Luna's neck, the evidence of systematic abuse. Nothing about this situation was legitimate. "If you have legal claim to these animals," Omar said, "you can present your documentation to the police." Kane's laugh was cold and calculating. "The police are already involved, Mr. Omar. But let me be clear about something. I have resources they don't. I have patience they don't. And I have a very long memory." The line went dead. Omar looked at his phone with shaking hands. "He's threatening us." "He's desperate," Dr. Layla corrected, "which makes him dangerous, but also means we're winning. If he had any legal claim to Luna and the puppies, he would have gone through official channels. The fact that he's resorting to intimidation means we have something he can't get any other way." Officer Hassan called 20 minutes later with an update. "We've been investigating Kane's property based on the information from tonight's arrests. We can't get a search warrant yet. Not enough evidence, but we've got surveillance on his compound. It looks like a legitimate business from the outside, but there's a lot of activity at odd hours." "What kind of activity?" Omar asked. "Vehicles coming and going after midnight. People who don't look like they're there for dog training. And we intercepted some interesting radio chatter. They're definitely looking for a missing asset that matches Luna's description." Dr. Layla took the phone. "Officer Hassan, how long can we realistically stay hidden up here?" "That depends on how badly Kane wants those dogs back and how much he's willing to risk to get them. We're building a case, but these things take time. Could be days, could be weeks." After the call ended, Omar found himself wondering if he'd made the right choice. He'd wanted to help an injured animal, but now he'd put his son in potential danger. What if Kane's people found the cabin? What if they came in the night? As if sensing his turmoil, Luna approached him and rested her head against his knee. When he looked into her eyes, he saw not just gratitude, but determination. She had chosen to trust him with the most precious things in her world, her babies. She was asking him not to give up on her. "We're going to figure this out," he whispered to her. "I promise." That night, Omar barely slept. Every sound outside, wind through the trees, an owl calling, branches creaking, made him check the windows and doors. But Luna seemed at peace, curled around her puppies with Zane sleeping nearby, one small hand resting on her back. Around 3 a.m, Luna's behavior changed. Her ears perked up, and she lifted her head, staring toward the front of the cabin. Omar sat up immediately, listening for whatever had caught her attention. At first, there was nothing but normal forest sounds. Then he heard it, the distant rumble of an engine, still far away, but getting closer. Omar woke Dr. Layla quietly. Something's coming. She listened for a moment, then nodded grimly. That's not a patrol car. The engine's too heavy, and they're driving without headlights. They had perhaps 5 minutes before whoever was approaching reached the cabin. Omar's mind raced through their options. They could call for help, but response time would be at least 20 minutes. They could try to run, but Luna was still weak, and carrying 4 newborn puppies through the dark forest would be nearly impossible. Luna made the decision for them. She stood up, walked to where Zahn was sleeping, and gently nudged him awake with her nose. When the boy opened his eyes, she looked directly at him, then at her puppies, then toward the back of the cabin. "She wants us to hide the babies," Zayn whispered, understanding immediately. Dr. Layla grabbed the puppy box while Omar gathered blankets. There was a small storage room at the back of the cabin, windowless and well insulated. If someone searched the main areas, they might miss it entirely. "Zayn, you stay with the puppies," Omar instructed. "Keep them quiet and warm. Don't come out until one of us comes to get you." "What about Luna?" Zayn asked, looking at the German Shepherd with worried eyes. Luna walked over to the boy and licked his face gently, then turned toward the front door. Her message was clear. She would protect them, but the puppies needed to be hidden first. They had just gotten Zayn and the puppies settled in the storage room when the sound of the engine stopped. Omar peered through a gap in the front curtains and saw a large black SUV parked at the edge of the clearing, its lights off. 2 figures got out, both carrying flashlights and what looked like equipment. One of them spoke into a radio. "We're at the location. No lights inside, but there's a vet van parked outside. They're here." Luna positioned herself by the front door. Every muscle in her body coiled for action. But instead of the aggressive posture Omar might have expected, she seemed almost strategic, as if she had a plan. The men approached the cabin cautiously, their flashlight beams sweeping across the windows. One of them tried the front door handle, locked as expected. The other moved around to check the back. "Dr. Nasir," one of them called out. "We know you're in there. Mr. Kane sent us to collect his property. Nobody needs to get hurt." Dr. Layla stepped close to the door, but didn't open it. "You're trespassing on private property. Leave now, or I'm calling the police." "Go ahead and call them," the man replied. "By the time they get here, we'll be long gone, with what we came for." The back door rattled as the second man tried to force it open. Luna's ears swiveled toward the sound, but she remained focused on the front entrance. She had learned something during the confrontation at the clinic. These people worked in teams, with one creating a distraction while the other tried to break in from behind. Omar heard the telltale scraping of lockpicks at the back door. This time, they weren't just trying to get in. They were trying to do it quietly, without alerting anyone inside to exactly where they were entering. But Luna was already moving. Instead of charging toward the back door, she did something unexpected. She barked once, loud and sharp, then immediately bolted for the front of the cabin and threw herself against the front door, making it shake violently. The men outside reacted exactly as she'd anticipated. The one at the front door assumed she was trying to break out to attack him, and he stepped back. The one at the back door stopped picking the lock and moved toward the front to help his partner, thinking they were about to face an aggressive dog attack. What they didn't expect was for Omar to slip out the back door now that both men were focused on the front of the cabin. Omar had never considered himself particularly brave, but watching Luna risk herself to protect his son and her puppies had awakened something fierce in him. He circled around the side of the cabin, staying low and quiet until he could see both intruders clearly. They were focused entirely on the front door, where Luna continued to make aggressive sounds, barking, growling, and scratching at the wood. One of them had pulled out what looked like a tranquilizer gun, similar to what they had used at the clinic. Omar's phone was already in his hand, recording everything. If he could get clear evidence of these men threatening them, it might be enough for the police to finally move against Kane. "Just shoot the damn dog through the door," one of the men was saying. "Dart will go right through the wood. Once she's down, we go in and collect the whole litter." "Kane wants the female alive," the other replied. "She's too valuable to risk overdosing." "Fine, I'll use a light dose, just enough to drop her for transport." Omar had heard enough. He dialed 911 while continuing to record, but he also did something else. He activated the emergency beacon Dr. Layla had given him, a device that would immediately alert Officer Hassan to their exact location. The man with the tranquilizer gun was taking aim at the door when Luna suddenly went silent. For a moment, the forest was completely still. Then she did something that surprised everyone. Instead of continuing her aggressive display, she began to whine. Not the broken sound they'd first heard in the pit, but something different. A sound that was unmistakably that of a mother calling to her babies. The men looked at each other, confused. "Where are the puppies?" one of them asked. "She should be with them." "Maybe they're deeper in the cabin," the other replied. "We need to get inside and search properly." But Luna's whining grew louder, more urgent. And then from somewhere in the distance came an answering sound, the high-pitched cries of very young puppies carried on the night air. The men turned toward the sound, their flashlights sweeping the forest. "They're not in the cabin," one of them realized. "They moved them." Omar's heart sank. Somehow, Luna's calls had triggered responses from her babies in the storage room, and the sound had carried farther than he'd thought possible. The men were now moving away from the cabin, following the sound. But Luna wasn't done. As the men moved toward the back of the cabin, she exploded through the front door, not breaking it down, but slipping through as Dr. Layla opened it from inside. The dog launched herself at the nearest intruder, not to attack, but to herd, driving him away from the direction of the storage room and toward the forest. The man stumbled backward, trying to bring his tranquilizer gun to bear, but Luna was too fast and too smart. She darted around him, nipping at his legs and keeping him off balance, always staying just out of reach of the weapon. The second man tried to circle around to help his partner, but that's when Omar made his move. He stepped out from behind the SUV, phone still recording, and called out, "Police are on the way! You're trespassing and threatening civilians." Both men spun toward him, distracted from Luna. In that moment of confusion, the German Shepherd did something extraordinary. Instead of continuing to harass the men, she ran straight back to Omar, putting herself between him and the intruders. "You're making a big mistake," one of the men warned, his tranquilizer gun now pointed at Omar. "Kane doesn't forget people who interfere with his business." "Good," Omar replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "Because I don't forget people who torture animals." In the distance, sirens began to wail. The emergency beacon had worked. Help was coming. The two men looked at each other, then at their SUV, calculating whether they had time to search the cabin before the police arrived. Luna settled the question for them by positioning herself directly in their path to the vehicle, a clear message that they'd have to go through her to escape quickly. "This isn't over," one of them said as they backed toward their SUV. "Kane has a long reach." "Tell Kane he can reach all he wants," Omar called back. "Some things are worth protecting." The men drove off just as the first police car came roaring up the dirt road, followed closely by Officer Hassan's vehicle and an ambulance Dr. Layla had called as a precaution. As the chaos settled and statements were given, Omar found himself back in the storage room with Zane and the puppies. Luna was there too, methodically checking each of her babies to make sure they were unharmed. "Papa," Zane said quietly, "Luna saved us, didn't she?" Omar looked at the German Shepherd, who was now allowing the puppies to nurse while keeping one eye on the door. "We saved each other," he replied. Dr. Layla appeared in the doorway. "Officer Hassan wants to talk to us about next steps. Kane's people are getting bolder, which means we're running out of time to stay hidden." But Luna had already made her decision about next steps. She looked at Omar, then at Zane, then at her puppies. When she looked back at Omar, her message was clear. Wherever they went next, they went together. What do you think Kane will try next? Drop your predictions in the comments below. Officer Hassan's expression was grim as he finished reviewing the video Omar had recorded of Kane's men threatening them. The footage clearly showed the tranquilizer guns, heard the threats, and captured their admission of working for Kane. But when he looked up from Omar's phone, his face told a different story than Omar had hoped. "This is good evidence," Hassan said carefully. "But it's still not enough for a search warrant on Kane's main facility. These men can claim they were trying to recover stolen property, and without proof that Kane himself ordered the break-in attempts. What about the shock collar? Dr. Layla interrupted. The burn marks on Luna, the scrambled microchip? All circumstantial. Kane's lawyers will argue that Luna was a rescue case they were rehabilitating, and that she escaped during treatment. Hassan ran his hands through his hair in frustration. I know it sounds crazy, but this guy has been running his operation for years without giving us anything solid to work with. Omar felt a crushing weight of disappointment. After everything they'd been through, everything Luna had suffered, it still wasn't enough to stop Kane. However, Hassan continued, there is something else we can try. It's risky, and I can't officially endorse it, but... He looked around the cabin's main room, where Luna was peacefully nursing her puppies, while Zane read them a story from one of his picture books. The scene was so normal, so innocent, that it seemed impossible to believe they were at the center of a criminal investigation. What kind of something else? Omar asked. Kane's operation depends on secrecy. He can't afford public attention, media scrutiny, or customers asking too many questions. If we could somehow document what's really happening at his facility, get footage of the conditions, the illegal breeding operation, the abuse. Dr. Layla immediately shook her head. You're talking about breaking into his compound. That's illegal, dangerous, and would get any evidence thrown out of court. Not breaking in, Hassan said carefully. But Kane advertises his business as a legitimate security dog training facility. He offers tours to potential clients. If someone were to schedule a tour and happened to notice things that didn't seem right. Omar understood what Hassan was suggesting. You want us to go there, pretend to be interested customers. I want someone to go there, Hassan corrected. Someone with a legitimate reason to be evaluating security dogs. Someone who might reasonably ask to see the breeding facilities, the kennels, the training areas. That's insane, Dr. Layla said flatly. Kane knows what Omar looks like. His men have seen him twice now. But they haven't seen me, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Amina, Dr. Layla's elderly neighbor who had helped them with supplies when they first brought Luna to the clinic. She was a small woman in her 70s, with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had raised 5 children and run a business for 40 years. Mrs. Amina, what are you doing here? Dr. Layla asked, surprised. Doctor, Layla called me to check on things at the clinic while she was away. I heard about your situation and drove up to see if I could help. The older woman walked over to where Luna was lying with her puppies and knelt down carefully. Luna, who had been wary of every new person she'd met, immediately relaxed and allowed Mrs. Amina to pet her. I've been thinking about this Kane character, Mrs. Amina continued. My late husband used to breed hunting dogs, legitimately. I know what a proper breeding operation looks like, and I know what questions to ask that would make any illegal breeder nervous. Hassan looked intrigued but concerned. Mrs. Amina, this isn't a game. These people are dangerous. Young man, I survived raising 5 teenagers and 40 years of running a restaurant in the roughest part of town. I think I can handle one arrogant dog breeder. She scratched behind Luna's ears, and the German Shepherd actually smiled the first time Omar had seen her do that. Besides, what's he going to do? Attack a harmless old lady who's interested in buying a guard dog for her granddaughter's farm? The plan that emerged over the next hour was simple but risky. Mrs. Amina would contact Kane's business, claiming to represent a wealthy family looking for trained protection dogs for their rural property. She would request a tour of the facilities, emphasizing that her clients were very particular about the breeding and training conditions of any dogs they purchased. The key, Hassan explained, is to get him to show off. Men like Kane are proud of their operations, even the illegal parts. If he thinks he's dealing with a serious buyer with serious money, he might let his guard down. Dr. Layla would equip Mrs. Amina with a small hidden camera, the kind used for wildlife monitoring, sewn into her jacket. The footage would be admissible in court as long as she was legally on the property as an invited guest. What about us? Omar asked. What do we do while Mrs. Amina is walking into danger? You stay here and keep Luna and the puppies safe, Hassan replied. If this goes wrong, Kane will know we're onto him, and he'll likely escalate his efforts to recover what he sees as his property. But Luna had other ideas, As the adults talked, she had been listening with the intense focus she showed whenever humans were discussing something important. Now, she stood up, walked over to Mrs. Amina, and sat down directly in front of her. "What is it, beautiful?" Mrs. Amina asked, reaching out to stroke Luna's head. Luna looked at the older woman for a long moment, then did something extraordinary. She walked back to her puppies, picked up little Echo, the most vocal of the litter, and carried her over to Mrs. Amina. She placed the puppy gently in the woman's lap, then looked up at her with unmistakable intent. "She wants to come with you," Zane said, with the straightforward wisdom of childhood. "She wants to help catch the bad man." Hassan immediately shook his head. "Absolutely not. If Kane sees Luna, he'll know exactly what's happening." But Mrs. Amina was studying Luna's face with the attention of someone who had spent decades reading the intentions of creatures who couldn't speak human language. "She's not asking to come as Luna," the older woman said slowly. "She's asking to come as evidence." Dr. Layla understood first. "You're thinking of bringing her as an example of Kane's work, telling him you're interested in breeding rights for a female with her bloodline." "Exactly. Kane thinks she's his property anyway. If I show up with her, claiming my clients purchased her from him through an intermediary, he'll be curious enough to let me onto the property. And once I'm there with Luna..." Mrs. Amina's eyes hardened. "Let's see how he reacts when he comes face to face with the animal he tortured." The plan was audacious and dangerous, but it had one major advantage. It would give them a witness to Kane's reaction when he saw Luna again. If he recognized her, if he revealed any knowledge of her past treatment, it would be captured on camera. Over the next 2 days, they prepared carefully. Mrs. Amina called Kane's business and spoke with impressive authority about her client's needs for trained protection dogs. She mentioned that they already had one female from his breeding program, acquired through a broker, you understand, and were interested in acquiring males with compatible bloodlines. Kane, as predicted, was intrigued. He agreed to a private tour of his facilities, scheduled for the following afternoon. Dr. Layla worked with Luna to prepare her for what might be a traumatic experience. "I can give her a mild sedative to keep her calm," she offered, "but nothing that would affect her alertness. If this is going to work, she needs to be herself." Luna seemed to understand the importance of what they were planning. She had become more alert, more focused, as if she knew that her time to confront her past was approaching. The night before the planned visit, she spent hours checking on each of her puppies, as if memorizing their scents and sounds. "She's afraid she won't come back," Zane observed, watching Luna's behavior with the insight that children sometimes have about emotional truths that adults miss. Omar knelt down beside Luna and looked into her intelligent, brown eyes. "You're coming home," he promised her. "All of this is so that you and your babies can be safe forever. But you don't have to do this if you're scared." Luna's response was to walk over to where Mrs. Amina was sitting and place her head in the older woman's lap. Her message was clear. She trusted this human to help her do what needed to be done. The morning of the visit, Kane's facility looked exactly like what it claimed to be, a professional dog training business. The main building was modern and clean, with large windows and a welcoming reception area. Signs advertised services like executive protection training, canine security consulting, and custom breeding programs. Mrs. Amina arrived in a rented luxury car, dressed like the wealthy representative she was pretending to be. Luna sat calmly in the passenger seat, wearing a simple collar doctor. Layla had chosen to replace the torture device Kane's people had used. "Mrs. Amina?" Kane greeted them personally, his smile warm and professional. He was a man in his 50s, well-dressed and articulate, exactly the kind of person who could run an illegal operation while maintaining a legitimate facade. "And this must be the female you mentioned." Kane's eyes fixed on Luna, and for just a moment, his professional mask slipped. Mrs. Amina caught it, a flash of recognition, followed quickly by confusion. He knew this dog, but he couldn't figure out how she had ended up here. "Beautiful animal," Kane said, recovering his composure. "May I ask which of my breeding pairs produced her?" Mrs. Amina had prepared for this question. "My clients prefer to keep their sources confidential, you understand. Business discretion, but they were very impressed with her temperament and intelligence, which is why they're interested in expanding their program." Kane nodded, but his eyes never left Luna. The German Shepherd, for her part, was displaying remarkable self-control. Every muscle in her body was tense, and her ears were flattened slightly, but she showed no signs of the fear or aggression that might be expected from an abused animal seeing her abuser again. "Of course," Kane said. "Shall we begin the tour? I think you'll be impressed with our facilities." The public areas of Kane's operation were exactly what they appeared to be: professional, clean, and well-equipped. He showed them training areas where dogs practice protection work, comfortable kennels for animals and residents, and state-of-the-art veterinary facilities. "Very impressive," Mrs. Amina said, playing her role perfectly. "My clients will want to know about your breeding program specifically. They're interested in the genetic lines, the selection process, the care of breeding females during pregnancy and after birth." Kane's smile became slightly strained. "Our breeding program is more specialized. Not all clients require that level of detail." "Mine do," Mrs. Amina said firmly. "They're developing a significant security program for multiple properties. Quality genetics are essential." As they walked deeper into the facility, Luna's behavior became more noticeable. She stayed close to Mrs. Amina, but her head was up, her nostrils flaring as she took in scents that clearly triggered memories. When they passed a particular hallway, she stopped completely and stared down it with such intensity that both humans noticed. "What's down there?" Mrs. Amina asked innocently. "Storage areas," Kane replied quickly. "Nothing that would interest your clients." But Luna's reaction had been captured by the hidden camera, and her body language spoke volumes. Whatever was down that hallway, it was significant to her past. Kane led them to what he called his premium breeding facility, a separate building behind the main complex. As they approached, the sound of dogs barking became audible, but it was different from the confident barks they had heard in the training areas. These sounds were higher-pitched, more frantic, layered with distress. "Some of our younger animals," Kane explained dismissively, still adjusting to the program. Inside the breeding facility, Mrs. Amina's hidden camera captured scenes that would later make seasoned police officers sick to their stomachs. Rows of small cages contained female dogs in various stages of pregnancy or nursing, many showing signs of malnutrition and injury. The conditions were cramped, unsanitary, and designed for maximum production rather than animal welfare. Luna's reaction was immediate and visceral. She began to shake, her breathing became rapid, and she pressed herself against Mrs. Amina's legs. But she didn't retreat. Instead, she seemed to be gathering courage for something. "This female seems distressed," Kane observed, his voice carrying a hint of suspicion. "Perhaps the environment is too stimulating for her." "She's always been sensitive," Mrs. Amina replied smoothly. "Very empathetic to other animals. It's one of the traits my clients value." As they moved deeper into the facility, Luna suddenly broke away from Mrs. Amina and walked directly to one of the cages. Inside was an older German Shepherd female, lying on her side while several puppies nursed. The dog looked up at Luna, and something passed between them. Recognition, shared experience, understanding. "Interesting," Kane said, his voice now openly suspicious. "She seems to know that animal." Mrs. Amina's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "Dogs often recognize their relatives, even after separation. Is this female from the same bloodline?" Kane didn't answer directly. Instead, he moved closer to Luna, studying her with calculating eyes. "You know," he said slowly, "this animal reminds me of a valuable female that went missing from our program recently. Very valuable. The kind of loss that requires investigation." Luna turned to face Kane directly. For a moment, they stared at each other. The man who had tortured her and the animal who had survived his cruelty. Then Luna did something that surprised everyone in the room. She sat down calmly, looked Kane in the eye, and let out a single, clear bark. Not aggressive, not fearful, but defiant. A sound that said, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Kane's professional mask finally slipped completely. "Where did you really get this dog?" he demanded, his voice harsh. "Because I think you and I need to have a very different conversation." Mrs. Amina activated the panic button hidden in her pocket, a signal to Officer Hassan, who was waiting with backup just outside the facility's perimeter. But she also did something else that no one had planned for. She looked Kane directly in the eye and said, "I got her from a shallow pit where you left her to die with her babies, and now she's going to help us shut down your entire operation." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of sirens approaching rapidly. Kane's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, calculation, and finally, resignation. He had been caught, recorded, and witnessed in his own facility, surrounded by the evidence of his crimes. Luna stood up, walked over to the cage containing the other German shepherd, and placed her paw against the wire. Then she looked back at Mrs. Amina with eyes that held something new. Not just trust, but triumph. How do you think Kane will react when he realizes he's been completely outsmarted? Share your thoughts below. Kane's reaction was swift and desperate. The moment he heard the sirens growing louder, his businessman facade crumbled completely, revealing the cold predator beneath. His hand moved towards something behind his back, but Luna was faster. The German shepherd launched herself forward, not in a wild attack, but with the precision of a trained protection dog. She knocked Kane off balance, sending him stumbling backward into one of the cages. The sound of his body hitting the metal was drowned out by the chorus of barking from the imprisoned dogs, who seemed to sense that something momentous was happening. "You think you've won something?" Kane snarled as he tried to regain his footing, his voice echoing off the concrete walls of the breeding facility. "You have no idea what you've done. This is bigger than just me." Mrs. Amina backed toward the exit, her hidden camera still recording everything. But Luna didn't retreat. Instead, she positioned herself between Kane and the cages full of breeding females, as if protecting animals she'd never met but understood completely. The first police officers burst through the facility doors, just as Kane made a desperate lunge toward a back exit. Officer Hassan was among them, his weapon drawn and his face grim with determination. "Marcus Kane, you're under arrest," Hassan shouted, but Kane was already running. What followed was a chase that would later be described by investigators as one of the most emotionally charged they'd ever witnessed. Kane fled through his own facility, past the evidence of his crimes, while Luna pursued him with single-minded determination. Not to attack, but to prevent his escape, herding him away from exits, blocking his path, forcing him toward the waiting police officers. The other dogs in the facility seemed to understand what was happening. Their barking grew louder, more urgent, as if they were cheering Luna on. Some of them began pawing at their cage doors, adding to the cacophony that filled the building. Kane finally cornered himself in what appeared to be an office area. Officer Hassan and his team surrounded him, weapons drawn, while Luna stood guard at the only exit. The German shepherd's breathing was heavy, but her eyes were alert and focused. She had helped bring her tormentor to justice. "It's over, Kane," Hassan said firmly. "Put your hands where we can see them." For a moment, Kane seemed to consider fighting. His eyes darted around the room, looking for weapons, escape routes, anything that might give him an advantage. But then his gaze fell on Luna, and something in her steady stare seemed to break whatever defiance he had left. "You don't understand," Kane said as the handcuffs clicked into place. "Those dogs are merchandise. I have clients, contracts, obligations. This will destroy legitimate businesses." "The only thing being destroyed here is your illegal operation," Hassan replied. "And frankly, that can't happen soon enough." As Kane was led away, Mrs. Amina finally allowed herself to breathe. The hidden camera in her jacket had captured everything. The horrific conditions in the breeding facility, Kane's admission of ownership over Luna, his attempted escape, and most importantly, his own words condemning himself. But the work was far from over. The facility contained more than 40 dogs in various states of distress, malnutrition, and abuse. Each one would need immediate veterinary care, behavioral assessment, and eventually rehabilitation for adoption. Dr. Layla arrived with a team of volunteer veterinarians within the hour. The scene that greeted them was heartbreaking, but also hopeful. Luna moving from cage to cage, somehow communicating with the other dogs, her presence seeming to calm them in ways that human voices couldn't. "It's like she's telling them they're safe now," observed Dr. Sarah, one of the volunteer vets. "I've never seen anything like it." Omar and Zayn arrived shortly after, having been escorted by police from the cabin. Zayn's eyes went wide when he saw the rows of cages, but instead of being frightened, he seemed to understand immediately what they were witnessing. "Papa," he whispered, tugging on Omar's sleeve. "These are Luna's friends, aren't they? The ones who couldn't escape?" Omar nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Yes, son, but they're safe now, thanks to Luna and Mrs. Amina." The reunion between Luna and her puppies was emotional for everyone present. She had been separated from them for less than 8 hours, but her relief was visible as she carefully nosed each one, checking their scents and sounds to make sure they were healthy and unharmed. Echo, Scout, Gentle, and Dream seemed to sense their mother's triumph. They were more active than usual, more vocal, as if they too understood that something important had changed in their world. Over the next several hours, the true scope of Kane's operation became clear. Text messages on his phone revealed a network of buyers across 3 states, people willing to pay premium prices for dogs trained for illegal fighting, intimidation, and worse. Financial records showed profits in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, all built on the suffering of animals like Luna. The breeding females were kept in a constant state of pregnancy, Dr. Layla explained to Omar as they watched her team examine the rescued dogs. Puppies were taken from their mothers at just weeks old, far too early for proper development. The males were either sold for fighting or culled if they didn't show adequate aggression. Omar felt sick imagining what Luna's life had been like before her escape. How many litters did she have? Dr. Layla's expression was somber. Based on the scarring and physical evidence, at least 6, possibly more. That means dozens of puppies taken from her over the years. Echo, Scout, Gentle, and Dream are probably the first babies she's ever been allowed to keep. The investigation expanded rapidly as federal authorities became involved. Kane's operation had interstate connections, and several other facilities in different states were raided simultaneously. By the end of the week, more than 200 dogs had been rescued from what investigators called one of the largest illegal breeding and fighting operations in the region. But for Omar, Zane, and Luna, the most important moment came 3 days after Kane's arrest, when Dr. Layla sat them down for a serious conversation about Luna's future. The legal proceedings will take months, possibly years, she explained. Luna will likely be needed as evidence in multiple trials. The question is where she and the puppies will live during that time. Omar had been dreading this conversation. He had assumed that Luna would be placed in some kind of official custody, probably separated from her babies, while the legal system worked through Kane's crimes. "What are our options?" he asked. Dr. Layla smiled for the first time in days. "Well, the prosecutor's office has been very impressed with your family's care of Luna and the puppies. Officer Hassan has recommended that you be appointed as Luna's official guardians during the legal proceedings." Zane looked up from where he was playing with Dream, the most social of the puppies. "Does that mean Luna gets to stay with us?" "It means more than that, Doctor," Layla continued. "If you're willing, it means Luna and her babies would live with you permanently. The court recognizes that she's bonded with your family, and given everything she's been through, separating her now would be traumatic." Omar felt a surge of emotion that surprised him with its intensity. Over the past week, Luna had become more than just a rescue case. She had become family. The idea of losing her now, after everything they'd shared, was unbearable. "What about the puppies?" he asked. "That's where things get interesting," Dr. Layla said. "Luna's puppies are considered evidence in the case against Kane, but they're also victims. The court wants them placed in homes where they can be properly socialized and cared for. Some of the other rescued dogs will need specialized rehabilitation, but Luna's babies are young enough that they can be placed in normal family homes." She pulled out a folder of applications. "We've had more than 300 families apply to adopt puppies from this case. The media attention has been incredible. But the final decision on placements will be up to you, as Luna's guardians, in consultation with our behavioral team." Omar looked at Zane, who was now surrounded by all 4 puppies. The little boy had formed individual relationships with each one, understanding their personalities in ways that amazed the adults. "Can we keep one?" Zane asked hopefully. "Dream likes it here, and Luna would be sad if all her babies went away." Dr. Layla laughed. "I was hoping you'd ask that. Dream has actually been showing some interesting traits that suggest he might be well suited for therapy work. If you're interested, we could train him alongside Luna. She's already showing remarkable intuition for helping traumatized animals." The idea of Luna working as a therapy dog made perfect sense to Omar. She had such a calming presence, such wisdom in her eyes. The thought of her helping other animals, or even people who had experienced trauma, seemed like a natural extension of her healing journey. Over the following weeks, they worked with Dr. Layla's team to carefully select homes for Echo, Scout, and Gentle. Each family was thoroughly vetted, not just for their ability to care for a dog, but for their understanding of what these particular puppies had been through. Echo went to a family with teenage children who were involved in competitive dog training. Her vocal nature and high energy made her perfect for agility and obedience competitions, channeling her intelligence into positive activities. Scout was placed with a search and rescue team, where her curiosity and problem-solving skills would be used to help find missing people in wilderness areas. Her new handler was a woman who had worked with rescue dogs for 20 years and understood the special needs of animals with traumatic backgrounds. Gentle, despite his size, showed remarkable patience and empathy. He was placed with a family that included an autistic child, where his calming presence and intuitive understanding of human emotions would help provide stability and comfort. Each placement was emotional for Luna. She seemed to understand that her babies were leaving to start their own lives, but she also appeared to approve of the families they'd chosen. Her goodbye to each puppy was tender and thorough, as if she was giving them final instructions for their new adventures. Dream stayed, as planned. His bond with Zane was undeniable, and his temperament suggested he would indeed be well suited for therapy work alongside his mother. But the most unexpected development came 6 weeks after Kane's arrest, when Officer Hassan visited with news that would change everything again. "The investigation has led us to something we didn't expect," he said, settling into a chair in Omar's living room, while Luna and Dream played with Zane in the backyard. Kane wasn't just running a breeding operation, he was also involved in a theft ring. Omar frowned. What kind of theft ring? Purebred dogs, stolen from families, sold into his operation, or to other illegal breeders. We've been matching DNA from the rescued dogs against missing pet databases across multiple states. Hassan pulled out a tablet and showed Omar a series of missing dog flyers. We think at least a dozen of the dogs we rescued were actually stolen pets, taken from their original families months or years ago. "What about Luna?" Omar asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Hassan's expression became gentle. "We found a match, Omar. Luna was reported stolen from a family in Colorado 3 years ago. Her original name was Stella, and she belonged to an elderly woman named Margaret Chen." The news hit Omar like a physical blow. Luna had an owner, a family, a life before Kane's horror. Someone out there had been looking for her, missing her, hoping she would come home. The family? Do they want her back? Omar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's complicated," Hassan replied. "Mrs. Chen passed away about a year ago, but she has a granddaughter, Emma, who's been keeping the missing dog report active. Emma lives in Denver now, works as a teacher, and has never stopped hoping that Stella would be found." Omar looked out at the backyard, where Luna was teaching Dream how to dig proper holes under the apple tree. Zayn was helping by providing running commentary on their technique. The scene was so peaceful, so right, that the thought of disrupting it felt like tearing apart his own heart. "What happens now?" he asked. Hassan leaned forward. "That's up to all of you to decide. Emma has been contacted about the discovery, and she wants to meet Luna, but she also understands that Luna has been through severe trauma and has formed new bonds. The legal situation is unique. Luna is evidence in a federal case, which means she can't be moved until the trials are complete anyway. How long will that take? Months, possibly a year or more, which gives everyone time to figure out what's best for Luna." Hassan paused, watching Luna through the window. "Emma seems like a good person, Omar. She's not demanding immediate custody. She just wants to know that the dog her grandmother loved is safe and happy." That evening, Omar had one of the most difficult conversations of his life. He sat Zayn down and tried to explain that Luna might have another family, people who had loved her before she came to them. Zayn listened with the serious attention he gave to all important matters, then asked the question that went straight to the heart of the issue. "But Papa, does Luna remember them, or does she remember us?" It was Dr. Layla who suggested the solution that would eventually satisfy everyone involved. "What if we arranged a meeting?" she proposed. "Let Emma come here, meet Luna in her current environment, see how she's bonded with your family, and let Luna decide how she feels about seeing Emma again." The meeting was scheduled for the following weekend. Emma Chen turned out to be a woman in her 30s with gentle eyes and a patient manner that immediately reminded Omar of Luna herself. She brought photos of Luna from her previous life, a younger, healthier version of the dog they knew, playing in a garden with an elderly woman who was clearly devoted to her. Grandma called her Stella because she said she was the brightest star in her sky, Emma explained, her voice thick with emotion. After Grandma died, I kept paying for missing dog posters and online searches because I couldn't bear the thought of Stella being out there somewhere, scared and alone. Luna's reaction to Emma was immediate and unmistakable. The moment she saw the woman, her ears perked up, her tail began wagging, and she approached with the eager curiosity of recognition. But when Emma knelt down and called, "Stella," Luna paused. She looked at Emma, then at Omar, then at Zane, who was watching with tears in his eyes. For a long moment, she seemed to be weighing something in her mind. Then she walked over to Emma, allowed herself to be petted and hugged, but returned to Zane's side. "She remembers you," Omar said to Emma, "but she's chosen us as her family now." Emma nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. "I can see that. And I can see how much you all love her." She looked around the yard, where Dream was attempting to dig his own hole next to Luna's garden excavation. "This is a good home. This is where she belongs now." The conversation that followed was emotional, but ultimately healing for everyone involved. Emma shared stories of Luna's life before Cain, helping them understand her personality and preferences. Omar and Zane told Emma about Luna's rescue, her courage during the investigation, and her new role as a therapy dog in training. "Would it be possible," Emma asked hesitantly, "for me to visit sometimes? Not to take her away, but just to be part of her life again?" Zane answered before Omar could. "Yes, Luna has lots of friends now. You can be one too." And so Luna gained an extended family. Emma became a regular visitor, someone who could share Luna's past while celebrating her present. When the trials finally concluded 18 months later, with Cain sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, the custody question had resolved itself naturally. Luna remained with Omar and Zane, officially adopted and legally theirs. Dream had indeed become a certified therapy dog, working alongside his mother to help other animals recovering from trauma, and Emma had become like an aunt to Zane, someone who understood the special bond between their family and the remarkable dog who had brought them all together. But the most touching moment came on the anniversary of Luna's rescue, when they returned to the park where it all began. Luna walked directly to the spot where the utility pit had been, now filled in and covered with new grass, and sat down quietly for a moment, as if remembering. Then she looked up at Omar and Zane, her tail wagging, ready for whatever adventure came next. What would you name a rescue dog if you found one in need? Tell us your ideas in the comments. 2 years after Luna's rescue, Omar stood at the kitchen window watching a scene that never failed to make him smile. In the backyard, Luna was supervising what had become known in their household as puppy training school. Dream, now fully grown but still gentle in nature, was teaching a new group of foster puppies the important skills of digging proper holes, finding the best sunny spots for napping, and most importantly, how to trust humans again. The foster program had started 6 months earlier when Dr. Layla approached Omar with a request that had changed their lives once again. The success of Cain's prosecution had led to increased awareness about illegal breeding operations, resulting in more rescue cases than the local shelters could handle. Many of these dogs needed specialized care from people who understood trauma and recovery. "Luna has such a gift for helping other animals heal," Dr. Layla had explained, "and your family has proven that you can provide the stability and patience these cases require. Would you consider fostering some of the dogs we rescue?" The current group consisted of 3 dogs, each with their own heartbreaking backstory. There was Maple, a young golden retriever who had been used as a bait dog in fighting rings and was terrified of loud noises. Shadow, an older German Shepherd mix who had spent years chained in a backyard with minimal human contact. And most recently, Whisper, a tiny Chihuahua who had been rescued from a hoarding situation and was slowly learning that not all humans were dangerous. Luna's approach to each new foster dog was methodical and wise. She seemed to understand that every animal needed different types of healing. With Maple, she was patient and protective, positioning herself between the younger dog and any source of loud sounds until Maple felt safe enough to investigate on her own. With Shadow, she demonstrated by example that humans could be trusted, showing him how to accept gentle touches and treats without fear. With Whisper, She simply provided a warm, safe presence, letting the tiny dog decide when she was ready for more interaction. "It's like she remembers what it felt like to be scared and alone," Zane observed one afternoon as he watched Luna coax Whisper out from under the porch with gentle patience. "She knows exactly what they need." At 7 years old now, Zane had developed his own intuitive understanding of traumatized animals. He had learned to move slowly around new fosters, to speak softly, and to let them approach him rather than forcing interaction. His drawings had evolved too. Instead of simple pictures of dogs, he now created detailed portraits of each foster animal that somehow captured their personalities and progress. The wall of Omar's home office was covered with these drawings, each one telling a story of healing and hope. There was Maple's progression from a cowering, fearful dog to one who could play fetch with joy. Shadow's transformation from aggressive wariness to peaceful contentment, and dozens of others, all the dogs who had passed through their home on their way to permanent families. But the most significant change in their lives had come 8 months earlier when Dr. Layla made an announcement that shocked everyone who knew her. "I'm retiring from active practice," she had told Omar during one of their regular check-ins. 40 years of veterinary medicine has been incredibly fulfilling, but I'm ready for the next chapter." Omar had been devastated. Dr. Layla wasn't just Luna's veterinarian. She had become a trusted friend and advisor, someone who understood the unique bond between their family and their dogs. "What will you do?" he had asked, trying to hide his disappointment. Dr. Layla's eyes had twinkled with mischief. "Actually, I was hoping you might be interested in a business partnership." The idea she proposed was ambitious but exciting. Instead of simply retiring, Dr. Layla wanted to establish a specialized rehabilitation center for traumatized animals. A place where dogs like Luna could serve as therapy animals for other rescues, where families could learn the proper fostering techniques, and where the community could come together to support animal welfare. "I have the veterinary expertise and the financial resources," she had explained. "You have the real-world experience of helping animals heal, and Luna has proven herself to be an exceptional therapy dog. Together, we could create something really special." Omar had been hesitant at first. He worked full-time as an accountant, and taking on a business venture seemed overwhelming. But as Dr. Layla outlined her vision, a facility where healing happened naturally, where traumatized animals could learn to trust again, where families like his could make a difference, he found himself caught up in the possibility. The Luna Hope Center opened 6 months later on a 10-acre property outside the city. The main building housed veterinary facilities, training areas, and comfortable spaces where potential adopters could interact with animals in a low-stress environment. The grounds included fenced play areas, walking trails, and a special section designed specifically for animals who needed quiet, isolated recovery time. Luna had been involved in the design process from the beginning. Dr. Layla and Omar had literally walked the property with her, watching her reactions to different areas and incorporating her preferences into the layout. The result was a facility that felt more like a home than an institution, a place where healing could happen at the pace each animal needed. The grand opening had drawn visitors from across the state. News stations covered the story of Luna's transformation from abuse victim to therapy dog, and the center received donations and volunteer applications from hundreds of people inspired by her journey. But for Omar, the most meaningful moment had come during the opening ceremony, when Luna walked calmly through the crowd of strangers, stopping to comfort a young girl who was afraid of dogs and gently interacting with a veteran who was considering adopting a PTSD service animal. In those interactions, Omar saw the fullness of Luna's healing, not just her own recovery, but her ability to help others find their own path to wholeness. Emma had flown in from Denver for the opening, bringing with her a special gift. A photo album she had created telling Luna's complete story, from her puppyhood with Margaret Chen, through her rescue and rehabilitation, to her new role as a therapy dog. "Grandma would be so proud," Emma had said, watching Luna work with a group of nervous rescue dogs. "She always said that Stella had a special soul, that she was meant to help others. I think this is what she meant." The center's success exceeded everyone's expectations. Within months, they had placed more than 50 dogs in permanent homes, provided training and support to dozens of foster families, and established partnerships with shelters across 3 states. But the real measure of success wasn't in numbers. It was in the transformation Omar witnessed every day. He thought about this as he watched Luna's current lesson with the foster dogs. Dream was demonstrating how to approach a nervous human, slowly, with calm energy, allowing the person to extend their hand first. Maple was practicing her recall training, her confidence growing stronger each day. Shadow was lying peacefully in the sun, no longer constantly scanning for threats. And Whisper was actually playing with a toy, something that would have been unthinkable when she first arrived. "Papa," Zayn called from the back door. "Doctor, Layla is here with a new dog." Omar's heart tightened slightly, as it always did when a new rescue arrived. Each case was different. Each animal carried their own unique trauma, and there was never any guarantee that they would be able to help. But as he watched Luna immediately stand up and walk toward the house, her posture alert but calm, he felt the familiar surge of hope that had carried them through every challenge. Dr. Layla's van was parked in the driveway, and Omar could see movement inside the transport crate in the back. As he approached, Dr. Layla stepped out, her expression serious but not without optimism. "This one's special," she said without preamble. "Female German Shepherd, about 3 years old. Found chained to a tree in a foreclosed property, probably abandoned when the family moved. She's been alone for weeks, maybe months." Through the crate's ventilation slots, Omar could see a pair of dark eyes watching him warily. The dog was silent, but her breathing was rapid and shallow, the signs of an animal who had learned that making noise brought unwanted attention. "What's her condition?" Omar asked, falling into the professional assessment mode he'd developed over months of rescue work. "Malnourished, dehydrated, some scarring on her legs from the chain. But physically, she's in better shape than many we've seen. The psychological trauma is the bigger concern. She hasn't made a sound since we picked her up, hasn't eaten, barely responds to human presence." As they spoke, Luna approached the van with her characteristic calm confidence. She didn't try to get close to the crate immediately. Instead, she lay down about 10 feet away, positioning herself where the new dog could see her but wouldn't feel threatened by her presence. "How long has she been like this?" Omar asked. "The neighbors think the family left about 3 months ago. Animal control got a call about barking, but by the time they investigated, she had stopped making noise entirely. She was just existing, surviving, but not living." Omar understood. He had seen it before in dogs who had been abandoned or severely neglected. They retreated so far into themselves that bringing them back required patience, time, and often the intervention of other dogs who could demonstrate that life could be safe again. "What do you want to call her?" Zayn asked, having appeared beside them with the quiet way children had of materializing when something important was happening. Dr. Layla looked at the silent figure in the crate. "The paperwork lists her as Shepherd Female number 247, but she deserves better than that." Luna stood up and moved closer to the crate, making a soft sound that wasn't quite a whine, but wasn't quite a greeting either. From inside the crate came an almost inaudible response, the first vocalization the dog had made since her rescue. "Hope," Zayn said suddenly. "Her name should be Hope." As they moved the crate into the center's isolation area, a quiet space designed for animals who needed time to decompress before joining the general population, Omar reflected on how much his understanding of healing had evolved. 2 years ago, he had thought that rescuing Luna from the pit was the end of the story. Now he understood that rescue was just the beginning. Hope's integration into their foster family would take weeks, possibly months. There would be setbacks, moments of progress followed by retreats, and the careful, patient work of rebuilding trust that had been shattered by human cruelty and abandonment. But there would also be moments of breakthrough, the first time Hope wagged her tail, the first time she approached a human voluntarily, the first time she played with another dog. These moments were what made all the difficult work worthwhile. Over the following weeks, Luna worked her magic with Hope in the same methodical way she had with all their foster dogs. She provided constant, non-threatening presence, demonstrating through her own behavior that humans could be trusted, that touch could be gentle, that voices could be kind. Dream, now experienced in his role as assistant therapy dog, took a different approach with Hope. Where Luna was maternal and protective, Dream was playful and inviting. He would bring toys to Hope's area, play by himself just within her sight, and gradually include her in games that required no human interaction. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after Hope's arrival. Omar was in the yard early one morning, preparing breakfast for all the dogs, when he heard something that made him stop and listen. From Hope's area came a sound he hadn't heard since her arrival, tentative barking. But it wasn't distressed barking. It was conversational, the kind of vocalization dogs use to communicate with each other. Hope was talking to Luna, and Luna was responding with gentle woofs of encouragement. When Omar looked over, he saw Hope standing at the fence of her enclosure, her tail moving in what might generously be called a wag. Luna was on the other side of the fence, mirroring Hope's posture, and between them passed the kind of communication that happened beyond human understanding. "She's ready," Dr. Layla said, appearing beside Omar with 2 cups of coffee, ready to start trusting again. The process of integrating Hope into the general population was gradual but steady. First, supervised visits with Luna and Dream in the main yard. Then, interactions with Zane, who had developed an uncanny ability to make even the most fearful dogs feel safe. Finally, careful introductions to Omar and other adults who visited the center. Each step forward was a victory, not just for Hope, but for everyone involved in her healing. Omar began to understand that in helping these animals recover, they were all learning something profound about resilience, trust, and the possibility of healing from even the deepest wounds. The day Hope was finally adopted by a retired teacher who specialized in working with traumatized animals was bittersweet. Omar and Zayn had grown attached to her quiet presence, her gradual emergence from fear into cautious optimism. But watching her walk confidently to her new owner's car, tail wagging and eyes bright with possibility, they knew they had accomplished something remarkable. "Will we see her again?" Zayn asked, waving goodbye as Hope's new family drove away. "Maybe," Omar replied. "But even if we don't, we'll always know that we helped her remember how to be happy." That evening, as Omar tucked Zayn into bed, his son asked the question that had been on both their minds. "Papa, do you think Luna remembers being scared like Hope was?" Omar considered this carefully. Luna was lying at the foot of Zayn's bed, as she did every night, her presence a comfort that had become so natural they barely noticed it anymore. Dream was curled up on a nearby dog bed, already deep in sleep after a day of therapy work. "I think Luna remembers," Omar said finally, "but I think she also remembers that scary feelings don't last forever. That's why she's so good at helping other dogs. She knows that things can get better." 3 months later, the Luna Hope Center received recognition from the State Veterinary Association for their innovative approach to animal rehabilitation. The awards ceremony was held at a conference center downtown, with an audience of veterinarians, animal welfare advocates, and local officials. Dr. Layla gave the acceptance speech, but she insisted that Luna be present on stage with her. As she spoke about the center's mission and methods, Luna sat calmly beside the podium, occasionally looking out at the audience with the serene confidence that had become her trademark. The traditional model of animal rescue focuses on physical healing and basic behavioral modification, Dr. Layla told the audience. But what we've learned from Luna and the dogs we've worked with is that true healing requires addressing trauma at a deeper level. It requires patience, understanding, and often the intervention of animals who have themselves overcome similar experiences. She gestured toward Luna, who responded by standing up and wagging her tail, drawing warm laughter from the audience. Luna teaches us that survival is not the same as healing, and healing is not the same as thriving. Our goal at the Luna Hope Center is not just to prepare animals for adoption, but to help them rediscover their capacity for joy, trust, and connection. The speech received a standing ovation, but Omar barely heard the applause. He was watching Luna, remembering the broken, terrified animal they had pulled from a pit 2 years earlier, and marveling at the confident, compassionate creature she had become. After the ceremony, as they drove home through the familiar streets of their city, Omar found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. It had started with a simple act of compassion, stopping to help an animal in distress. But it had grown into something larger, a mission that gave meaning to their daily lives and hope to countless animals who might otherwise be forgotten. "Papa," Zayn said from the back seat, where he was sketching in his ever-present art pad while Luna and Dream dozed beside him. "I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up, like Dr. Layla, but also like you and Luna." "What do you mean?" Omar asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "I want to help animals get better, but not just their bodies. I want to help them remember how to be happy, like Luna does." Omar smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the evening sun streaming through the car windows. "I think that's a wonderful dream, son, and I think Luna would be very proud of you for wanting to help others the way she does." As they pulled into their driveway, Omar saw Emma's car parked outside. She was visiting for the weekend, as she did every few months. Through the front window, he could see her setting the table for dinner, moving around their kitchen with the comfortable familiarity of someone who belonged there. This was their family now. Omar and Zane, Luna and Dream, the rotating cast of foster dogs who passed through their lives, Dr. Layla with her wisdom and guidance, Emma with her connection to Luna's past, and Mrs. Amina, who still stopped by regularly to check on everyone and share stories from her restaurant days. It wasn't the family Omar had planned or expected when he was married to Sarah, dreaming of conventional happiness. But it was the family they had chosen and built together, bonded not just by blood or legal ties, but by shared purpose and mutual care. That night, after dinner and stories and the evening routine of settling all the dogs in their favorite sleeping spots, Omar stood in his backyard looking up at the stars. Luna appeared beside him, as she often did during these quiet moments, leaning against his leg with the comfortable weight of absolute trust. "Thank you," he whispered to her, though he knew she couldn't understand the words. "Thank you for teaching us that broken things can heal, that scared things can become brave, and that love can grow in the most unexpected places." Luna looked up at him with those intelligent brown eyes that had first captured his heart in a muddy pit, and Omar could swear he saw understanding there, not just of his words, but of the gratitude and love behind them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more rescue cases, more traumatized animals who needed help, more opportunities to make a difference in the world. But tonight, in the peaceful darkness of their backyard, surrounded by the quiet breathing of sleeping dogs and the distant sounds of a city settling into rest, Omar felt something he hadn't experienced in years: complete happiness. Not the desperate happiness of someone trying to fill a void, but the deep contentment of someone who has found their purpose and is living it fully. As he turned to go inside, Luna fell into step beside him, and Omar realized that this was perhaps the greatest gift she had given him. Not just the joy of saving her life, but the discovery of how much richer his own life became when it was dedicated to helping others heal. The story that had begun with a child's curiosity and a father's reluctant compassion had become something neither of them could have imagined. It was a story of healing and hope, of second chances and unexpected families, of the profound connections that could form between species when fear was replaced with trust. And most importantly, it was a story that was still being written, one rescue at a time, one healed heart at a time, one life transformed by the simple power of unconditional love. In the end, Luna had done more than survive her ordeal. She had transformed it into a mission of healing that touched every life she encountered. And in helping her heal, Omar and Zayn had discovered their own path to wholeness. Proof that sometimes the most broken things, when mended with love and patience, become the strongest and most beautiful of all. What amazing animal rescue story from your own life would you share with us? We'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if Luna's story touched your heart, share it with anyone who loves animals, and subscribe for more incredible true stories of hope, healing, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and the animals who change our lives forever.